A widowed mechanic in oil-stained coveralls, a corporate developer worth $500 million, and one crumbling deed that could stop the demolition of an entire town block. When Trent Calloway walked into the Langford Development Group's Toronto headquarters with his 7-year-old daughter and a folder of documents he'd found in his dead wife's filing cabinet, he had no appointment, no lawyer, and no idea that the woman about to have him thrown out was sitting on the biggest land fraud scandal in Ontario's history. Stay until the end to see how one forgotten deed brought a tower of glass crashing down. Hit that like button and comment what province you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. The lobby of Langford Development smelled like fresh concrete and money. Not the kind of money Trent knew, the kind you counted out of a coffee can on the kitchen counter, but the architectural kind, the kind that announced itself through 40-foot ceilings and a reception desk carved from a single piece of Canadian granite. Trent pushed through the revolving doors with Rosie's hand in his. His coveralls were clean, the best pair he owned, dark blue with his shop's name stitched above the pocket in yellow thread. Callaway Motors. He'd changed out of the grease-stained ones in the truck, in the parking garage 3 floors below, standing between a Mercedes and a Tesla, feeling like a trespasser already. Rosie looked up at the ceiling. "Daddy, it's like a church." "Yeah, sweetheart, kind of is." The reception desk was staffed by a young man with a headset and a smile that looked like it had been focus grouped. His name tag said Aiden. His eyes did the scan, coveralls, work boots, little girl in a winter coat 2 sizes too big, hand me down from the church donation bin. Folder under Trent's arm, thick, dog-eared at the corners. "Can I help you? I need to see Victoria Langford. Do you have an appointment?" "No." Aiden's smile thinned. "Mrs. Langford doesn't take walk-in meetings. If you'd like to schedule something, I can connect you with her assistant." "I've been calling her assistant for 2 weeks. Nobody calls back." "I'm sorry to hear that. I can take your information, and it's about the Halcyon Creek project. The demolition permits she filed for the East Block." Aiden's fingers paused above the keyboard. The Halcyon Creek project was a $400 million mixed-use development that had been all over the news for months. Luxury condos, retail space, a hotel. The kind of project that turned a sleepy stretch of lakeshore into something glossy and unrecognizable. It was also the project that was going to demolish Trent's garage, Mrs. Fenton's bookshop, the Tremblay family's bakery, the community hall where Rosie took dance lessons on Saturday mornings, and the row of houses where 3 generations of families had lived since the 50s. "I have documents she needs to see before those permits go through," Trent said. "It's urgent." Aiden picked up his phone. "Security to reception, please." Trent's stomach tightened. "I'm not causing trouble." "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." 2 security guards appeared from a side corridor. One was tall, broad-shouldered with a shaved head. The other was shorter, but built like a fire hydrant. They moved with the practiced ease of men who'd escorted 100 people out of 100 lobbies. Rosie pressed closer to Trent's leg. She'd been quiet since they'd left the truck. She was good at reading rooms, better than a 7-year-old should have been. She'd learned it in the year after her mother died, watching Trent's face for cues about whether the world was safe or not. "Sir, you need to come with us." The tall guard's voice was polite but final. "Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking, Ems. Langford is unavailable. She's about to sign demolition permits that are based on fraudulent land surveys. If she goes through with it, she's going to face lawsuits from every homeowner on that block." The word fraudulent landed in the lobby like a stone in still water. Aiden's typing stopped. The guards exchanged a glance. Then the elevator chimed. Victoria Langford stepped out. Trent recognized her from the newspapers, from the town hall meetings where she'd shown up with a team of lawyers and a PowerPoint presentation full of renderings that made Halcyon Creek look like a postcard. She was mid-40s, tall, dark hair cut sharp at the jaw, wearing a charcoal suit that moved like it had been sewn onto her. Her heels struck the marble with a rhythm that demanded attention. She was talking to a man beside her, silver-haired, carrying a tablet. They were discussing timeline adjustments, something about the environmental review. "Mrs. Langford." Trent's voice cut across the lobby. Everything stopped. Victoria turned, her eyes found him. Did the scan, coveralls, work boots, little girl, folder. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted, the rapid calculation of someone used to assessing threats. "Who are you?" "My name is Trent Calloway. I own a garage on Birch Street in Halcyon Creek. Your company is about to demolish it. We're handling this, the tall guard said. Victoria ignored him. She walked closer. The silver-haired man followed. She stopped 8 feet away, close enough that Trent could see the small gold pin on her lapel, the Langford Development logo. Mr. Calloway, if you have concerns about the Halcyon Creek project, you can submit them through the public comment process. The deadline was last month. I tried. Nobody listened. I called your office. I sent emails. I showed up at the town planning meeting and got 3 minutes at a microphone before your lawyers shut me down. The public process exists for a reason. The public process is rigged and you know it. Victoria's jaw tightened. I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. Trent held up the folder. These are the original land title records for the east block of Halcyon Creek. My wife was a paralegal before she got sick. She worked at Morrison and Falk in Barrie. Before she died, she pulled these records because something didn't add up. The surveys your company submitted to the municipality show the east block as commercially zoned crown land that reverted to the township in 1987. But according to these records, it never reverted. The original grants are still active. Those properties belong to the families who've been living on them for 60 years. Your demolition permits are based on a lie. Silence. The silver-haired man who Trent would later learn was Philip Drayton, Langford Development's chief operations officer, stepped forward. That's a very serious accusation, Mr. Calloway. It's a very serious situation. Victoria studied him. Her expression was unreadable. You're a mechanic. I'm an engineer. I used to design transmissions for a company in Oshawa before the plant closed. Now I fix cars. But that's not the point. The point is, you walked into my building with no appointment, no legal representation, and a folder of documents that could have been printed off the internet this morning. And you're accusing my company of fraud. I'm telling you to check your surveys before you sign those permits. Our surveys were conducted by a certified firm. They've been reviewed by our legal team and approved by the township. Your surveys are wrong. Victoria turned to Drayton. Philip, have you heard of any issues with the Halcyon Creek land titles? Drayton shook his head. His face was smooth, composed. None whatsoever. Our due diligence was thorough. Mr. Calloway is mistaken. Something about the way he said it, too quick, too certain, made Trent's skin prickle. He'd spent 15 years reading engines, listening for the sound that didn't belong, the knock in the timing, the whisper of a failing bearing. Drayton's voice had that sound, the sound of something wrong underneath. Look at the documents, Trent said. That's all I'm asking. Victoria glanced at the folder, then back at Trent. Security, please escort Mr. Calloway out Ems Langford, and if he contacts my office again, refer him to our legal department. She turned to walk away. Daddy. Rosie's voice was small. She was looking up at him with wide brown eyes, the same eyes her mother had. Are we leaving? Yeah, baby, we're leaving. The guards walked them to the doors. One of them held it open with the kind of courtesy that was really just controlled force. Outside, Toronto was cold and gray, early March, the kind of day where the wind came off Lake Ontario like a slap. They walked back to the parking garage. Rosie was quiet. At the truck, Trent lifted her into her booster seat and buckled her in. His hands were steady. Everything else wasn't. He'd driven 4 hours from Halcyon Creek for this. Left the shop closed on a Tuesday, which meant lost income he couldn't afford to lose. Burned a quarter tank of gas in the old F-150. All for 3 minutes in a lobby and a door in his face. Daddy? Rosie said from the back seat. Yeah, that lady was mean. She was busy. No, she was mean. She looked at you like you were dirty. Trent gripped the steering wheel. He didn't have an answer for that because Rosie was right. They drove home in the dark. The 400 North was thick with trucks. Rosie fell asleep somewhere past Barrie. Her head lolled against the window, breath fogging the glass. Trent drove and thought about his wife, Brooke, about the filing cabinet in the basement where she'd kept her case files even after she got too sick to work, about the folder he'd found 3 weeks ago while looking for Rosie's birth certificate. Brooke had flagged the Halcyon Creek records months before she died. She'd written notes in the margins in her careful handwriting. Discrepancy in survey datum. Original grant not extinguished. Township records don't match provincial archive. She'd been building a case, quietly, on her own time, because she'd heard the rumors about the development and she'd known something was off. She hadn't finished. The cancer had taken her before she could. So Trent had picked it up, not because he was a lawyer, not because he understood all of it, but because Brooke had cared enough to start and somebody had to finish. His phone rang at 7 a.m. the next morning. Trent was making oatmeal, the instant kind, the store brand that tasted like cardboard but was 99 cents a packet. Rosie was at the kitchen table drawing pictures of horses. Mr. Calloway? A woman's voice, older, sharp, the kind of voice that had been honed in courtrooms. My name is Edith Sinclair. I'm a lawyer in Toronto. I understand you visited Langford Development yesterday. How did you know that? I have contacts in the building. One of them described a man in coveralls with a young daughter trying to show Victoria Langford a folder of land records. That sounded like someone I should talk to. Why? Because I've been investigating Philip Drayton for 3 years. Trent sat down. Drayton? The operations guy? The man who orchestrated the Halcyon Creek land surveys. Mr. Calloway, the discrepancies your wife found aren't accidents. Philip Drayton personally oversaw the survey process. He selected the firm, he approved the results, and he presented them to the Township Planning Board. The surveys were deliberately falsified to reclassify privately held land as reverted Crown property, which made it available for development acquisition at a fraction of its actual value. Why would he do that? Because Drayton has a financial interest in the construction consortium that won the building contract, a company called Northland Builds. His wife's brother runs it. The lower the land acquisition cost, the higher the profit margin on the build. Drayton stands to make somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million on the Halcyon Creek project alone. Trent looked at Rosie, still drawing horses, tongue poking out the side of her mouth in concentration. Brooke knew. Your wife was very good at her job. The records she pulled are exactly what I need to build a case. But I need the originals, and I need your help. What kind of help? I need you to file a formal objection to the demolition permits as an affected property owner. That gives us legal standing to demand a review of the surveys. Once the review is underway, I can subpoena Drayton's communications and financial records. I'm a mechanic, Miss Sinclair. I fix brake lines and replace alternators. I don't file legal objections. You walked into a $500 million company's headquarters and called their CEO a fraud to her face. I think you can handle some paperwork. A pause. Can you come to Toronto? I'll cover your expenses. I can't close the shop again. I've got bills. Bring Rosie. I have a very comfortable waiting room with a very good selection of coloring books. Despite everything, Trent almost smiled. He drove down the next morning. Edith Sinclair's office was in a brownstone on a side street near Osgood Hall, the kind of building that looked modest from outside, but had the quiet confidence of old money once you stepped through the door. Dark wood, leather chairs, the smell of coffee and paper. Edith was 72. White hair, reading glasses on a chain, a navy suit that looked like it had survived 3 decades of court appearances without a single wrinkle. She shook Trent's hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. Let me see the folder. He handed it over. Edith spread the documents across her desk and read them for 20 minutes without speaking. Rosie sat in the waiting room with a legal assistant named Harper, who'd produced coloring books and apple juice with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Your wife was brilliant, Edith said finally. She cross-referenced the Provincial Land Registry with the original Crown grants from 1952. Nobody does that anymore. Most lawyers don't even know the provincial archives exist. She was thorough. She was more than thorough. She found the gap that Drayton thought he'd buried. Edith held up a page. This is the original grant for Lot 47, Block 12, Halcyon Creek. Issued to Edward McAllister in 1952. Never surrendered, never reverted. The McAllister family sold it to the Tremblay family in 1978. The Tremblays have been paying property taxes on it continuously for 46 years. So the township knows the land is privately owned. The township's records were altered. Someone changed the status in the digital system to show reversion in 1987. But the paper records in the provincial archive tell a different story. That's what Brooke found. Drayton? Nah, almost certainly. He had access to the municipal planning database through his role coordinating the surveys. It would have taken 10 minutes to change a status code. Edith closed the folder. I'm filing the objection this afternoon. Emergency injunction to halt the demolition permits. I have a judge who owes me a favor. What happens to Drayton? That depends on Victoria Langford. If she's involved, we're looking at a conspiracy case. If she's not, if she genuinely doesn't know, then we might be able to turn her. She doesn't seem like the type who gets turned. She seems like the type who doesn't like being made a fool of. And right now, Philip Drayton is making a fool of her. The injunction was filed at 3 p.m. By 4, Trent's phone was ringing, a Toronto number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Calloway, this is Victoria Langford." Her voice sounded different on the phone, tighter, controlled but strained, like a wire pulled close to snapping. "Mrs. Langford, I just received notice of an emergency injunction against our demolition permits, filed by an Edith Sinclair on your behalf." "Yes. You want to tell me what's going on? I tried to tell you yesterday. You had me escorted out." Silence. Then, "I'm looking at the injunction filing. It references falsified land surveys, undisclosed financial relationships, and altered municipal records. These are serious allegations. They're serious problems. If any of this is true, it's true. If any of this is true, then I have a member of my senior leadership team who has been lying to me for 3 years. Her voice dropped. "Do you understand what that means?" "I understand what it means for the 46 families who are about to lose their homes." Another silence. Longer this time. "Come to my office tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring your lawyer." They went. Edith wore the same navy suit. Trent wore his one dress shirt, a blue button-down with a small hole near the cuff that he'd tried to sew shut himself. Rosie stayed with Harper and the coloring books. Victoria's office was on the 38th floor. Glass walls, a view of the lake that stretched to the horizon, furniture that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. She was standing at the window when they entered. She didn't turn around right away. "Close the door," she said. Edith closed it. Victoria turned. She looked like she hadn't slept. The sharp edges were still there, the suit, the posture, the jaw, but there were shadows under her eyes and a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there 2 days ago. "I spent last night going through every document related to the Halcyon Creek project," she said. "Every survey, every filing, every email. I pulled Philip's correspondence with the survey firm. I pulled the Township Planning Board minutes. I pulled the financial disclosures. And," Edith said, "and Philip Drayton is a liar." Victoria's voice was flat, stripped of everything except the facts. "The survey firm he selected, Cairn Geomatics, is owned by a numbered company that traces back to his brother-in-law's construction consortium. The survey results were tailored to match the reclassified land records, which were altered in the municipal database 18 months before the surveys were even conducted. He planned this." "We know," Edith said. "I didn't. We believe you." Victoria looked at Trent. "I owe you an apology. You owe the families in Halcyon Creek more than that." Something flickered across her face, not anger. Something closer to recognition, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "My grandfather built houses," she said quietly. "Not developments, houses. For families in Sudbury who worked the mines. He charged what people could afford, and he built them solid. My father turned it into a business. I turned it into a corporation. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about the people inside the houses and started thinking about the houses as line items." She sat down. "Philip came to me 4 years ago with the Halcyon Creek proposal. He said it was a slam dunk, undervalued lakefront property, cooperative township, clear title. I trusted him because I'd worked with him for a decade, because he'd never given me a reason not to." "He gave you plenty of reasons," Edith said. "You just weren't looking." "No, I wasn't." Victoria looked at the view. The lake was steel gray under cloud cover. "What do you need from me?" "Cooperation," Edith said. "Full access to Drayton's records. A public statement that the Halcyon Creek permits are being voluntarily suspended pending review. And when the time comes, testimony against Philip. Against Philip." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled her phone from her desk, pressed a button. "Janet, get me Philip Drayton. Tell him I need him in my office in 10 minutes. "No, don't tell him what it's about." She hung up. Looked at Trent. "You should probably wait outside for this part." They waited in the hallway. Edith stood with her hands clasped behind her back, calm as a surgeon between procedures. Trent leaned against the wall and tried to slow his heartbeat. 10 minutes later, Philip Drayton walked past them without a glance, pushed through Victoria's door, and closed it behind him. Through the glass, Trent watched. Victoria stood behind her desk. Drayton sat down, crossed one ankle over the other, relaxed. He said something. Victoria didn't respond. She opened a folder and pushed it across the desk. Drayton leaned forward to look at it. Then his face changed. It was like watching a mask crack. The composure, the silver-haired confidence, the easy smile, all of it fell away in the space of 3 seconds. He said something sharp. Victoria said something sharper. Drayton stood up. His chair scraped back. He pointed at Victoria. She didn't flinch. The door opened. Drayton walked out. He saw Trent and Edith standing there and stopped. "This is your doing," he said to Trent. His voice was quiet, controlled, but there was something behind it that made the air feel thin. "This is your doing, Mr. Drayton," Edith said. Mr. Calloway simply brought it to light. Drayton's eyes went to Edith. Something ugly passed across his face. "You have no idea what you've started. I have a very precise idea. I've been building this case for 3 years. Drayton looked back at Trent. "You're a mechanic from a nothing town. You think you can take me on?" Trent met his eyes. He'd spent 15 years reading engines. He could read people, too. And what he read in Drayton's face wasn't confidence. It was fear. "I think I already did," Trent said. Drayton walked away. His footsteps were fast, uneven, the sound of a man who was already running before his legs caught up. Victoria appeared in the doorway of her office. She looked shaken but resolute. "He's suspended. I'm calling the board. And then I'm calling the RCMP." 2 days later, the story broke. The Toronto Star ran it first, then the Globe and Mail, then CBC. Falsified surveys, altered land records, undisclosed financial relationships between a senior executive and a construction consortium. 46 families nearly displaced from their homes. Trent's name was in the articles. So was Brooks. A paralegal from Barrie who'd uncovered the fraud before she died, and whose husband had carried her work across the finish line. The story wrote itself. A widowed mechanic, a 7-year-old daughter, a dead wife's unfinished case. The media loved it. Trent hated it. The phone calls started. Reporters, morning shows, podcasters. People showing up at the garage asking for interviews. Rosie asked why strangers kept taking pictures of the shop. "Because your mom did something important," Trent told her. "And people want to know about it. Mom found the papers." "She did. And you brought them to the mean lady." "She's not mean, Rosie. She just didn't know the truth." "But she knows now." "Yeah, she knows now." Rosie thought about this. "So Mom helped even though she's gone?" Trent's throat closed. "Yeah, baby. She helped even though she's gone." Philip Drayton was arrested on a Thursday morning at his home in Oakville. RCMP Financial Crimes Unit. The charges were fraud, conspiracy, and forgery of public records. His brother-in-law was arrested the same day at the offices of Northland Builds. Edith called Trent with the news. "It's done. Both of them are in custody. Bail hearings tomorrow, but the Crown is opposing release." Flight risk. What happens to the families? The demolition permits are dead. Victoria Langford has publicly withdrawn the Halcyon Creek proposal. She's issued a formal apology to every property owner on the East Block, and the land stays exactly where it's been for 60 years, with the people who own it. Trent was standing in his garage when she told him. He was in the middle of replacing a water pump on a Civic, hands covered in coolant, Rosie doing homework at the desk in the corner that used to be Brooks. The desk still had Brooks' coffee mug on it, the one that said "World's Oakiest Paralegal." Nobody had moved it. Nobody was going to. "Edith," he said. "Yes? Thank you. Thank Brooke. She did the real work." After she hung up, Trent stood there for a while. The garage was quiet except for the radio playing softly in the background and the scratch of Rosie's pencil on paper. Outside, Halcyon Creek was doing what small towns did in late March. Snow melting, gutters running, the first crows back from wherever crows went in winter. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Victoria Langford called him 2 weeks later. "I'd like to come to Halcyon Creek," she said. "If you'll have me. You don't need my permission." "I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking if it would be welcome." Trent thought about it. "Mrs. Fenton at the bookshop might throw something at you." Victoria almost laughed. "I'll risk it." She came on a Saturday, drove up from Toronto in a black SUV, no driver, no entourage. Parked on Birch Street and walked into the garage like someone who'd never been inside one before, which she probably hadn't. Rosie was there, sitting on a stool, eating a granola bar. She looked at Victoria with the fearless directness of a child who hadn't learned diplomacy yet. "You're the lady who was mean to my dad." Victoria knelt down. "I was, and I'm sorry. He said you were just busy. He was being kind. I was being awful." Rosie considered this. "Okay, do you want a granola bar?" Victoria took one. It was the cheap kind, the store brand, and she ate it standing in a garage that smelled like motor oil and brake cleaner while Trent finished an oil change on Mrs. Fenton's Corolla. They talked about the project, about the families, about what came next. Victoria was restructuring Halcyon Creek, not as a luxury development, but as a community revitalization. Affordable housing mixed with commercial space, designed in consultation with the people who actually lived there. She'd hired a local architect. She'd set up a community advisory board. Mrs. Tremblay from the bakery was on it. "It's going to be slower," Victoria said. "Less profitable. My board's not thrilled, but it's right." "Yeah, it's right." She paused. "I want to offer you something. I don't want money. It's not money. It's a seat on the advisory board. Someone who actually lives here, who knows these streets, who'll tell me when I'm getting it wrong." Trent wiped his hands on a rag. "I fix cars. You also stood up to a $500 million company and won. I think you can handle a board meeting." He looked at Rosie, who was showing Victoria's driver, who'd come inside to use the washroom, her collection of Hot Wheels cars arranged by color on the windowsill. "I'll think about it," he said. "That's all I'm asking." Victoria left that afternoon. At the door, she turned back. "One more thing. Your wife's work, the research she did. I'd like to name the community center after her, if that's all right with you." Trent didn't say anything for a moment. Couldn't. "The Trent Calloway Community Center," Victoria said, "has a nice sound to it." "Yeah," Trent managed. "It does." After she left, Trent closed the garage early, picked up Rosie, walked to the lake. It was cold, the wind sharp off the water, but the light was doing that thing it did in late March, where it turned everything golden for about 20 minutes before the sun dropped behind the trees. "Daddy," Rosie said. "Yeah. Do you think Mom can see us?" Trent looked at the lake, at the town behind them, the town that was still standing because a woman who'd been dying had spent her last good hours pulling records from a dusty archive. "I think she can, sweetheart. I think she'd like the community center. I think she'd like knowing the bakery's still open," Rosie laughed. She really liked Mrs. Tremblay's butter tarts. Everybody likes Mrs. Tremblay's butter tarts. They stood there for a while, watching the light change. Then Rosie said, "Can we get butter tarts? It's almost dinner. Butter tarts can be dinner." "That's not how dinner works. Mom would let me." Trent looked down at his daughter. She was grinning, the kind of grin that knew exactly what it was doing. She had Brooke's smile. Had her stubbornness, too. "1 butter tart," he said. "Before dinner. 2. 1.5. Deal." They walked to the bakery. Mrs. Tremblay's was closing up but opened the door when she saw them. She gave Rosie 2 butter tarts and wouldn't take payment. "After what your daddy did," she said. "Butter tarts are free for life in this shop." They ate them walking home. The streets were quiet, a few lights coming on in windows. Someone's dog barking in a yard, the sound of a small town settling into evening. At home, Trent made dinner. Real dinner, not butter tarts. Rosie helped, standing on her step stool, stirring soup with the concentration of a brain surgeon. They ate at the kitchen table with the radio on. Rosie talked about school, about her friend Juniper's new cat, about how her teacher said Ontario used to be covered in glaciers. "Daddy," she said, halfway through a second bowl of soup. "Yeah. Are you going to do the board thing, the one the lady asked about?" "Maybe. I think you should. Why?" "Because Mom would want you to. She always said you were too smart to just fix cars." Trent set down his spoon. "She said that?" "She said you could do anything you wanted, but you always picked the thing that helped other people instead of the thing that helped you." It was the kind of sentence that shouldn't come from a 7-year-old. But Rosie had spent the last year of her mother's life sitting at bedsides and listening to the kinds of truths people tell when they're running out of time. "I'll do it," Trent said. "Good." After dinner, after bath time, after 2 stories and a negotiation about whether the hallway light could stay on, Rosie fell asleep. Trent sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and looked at Brooke's coffee mug on the desk in the corner. He picked up his phone, typed an email to Victoria Langford. "I'll take the board seat. Part-time. I still have a garage to run." The reply came 11 minutes later. "Perfect. Welcome aboard, Mr. Calloway. First meeting's next Thursday. Bring Rosie if you need to. We'll have butter tarts." Trent set the phone down, walked to the window. Outside, Halcyon Creek was dark and quiet. The lake was a black mirror under a sky full of stars. Somewhere out there, Drayton was in a cell waiting for a trial he was going to lose. The families on Birch Street were in their homes. The homes they'd almost lost, sleeping in beds they'd slept in for decades. Nothing about Trent's life looked different. Same apartment above the garage, same truck in the driveway, same bills on the counter, same empty space on the other side of the bed where Brooke used to sleep. But Rosie was safe. The town was safe. And somewhere in a filing cabinet downstairs, Brooke's careful handwriting sat in the margins of documents that had saved 46 families from losing everything. She'd started the work. He'd finished it. And maybe that was how it was supposed to go. Not one person doing everything, but people passing the torch, carrying each other's fights, finishing what the people they loved had started. Trent turned off the kitchen light, checked the locks, walked past Rosie's room, listened to her breathe. Then he went to bed, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't dream about hospitals or paperwork or the sound of Brooke's breathing machine. He dreamed about butter tarts and a lake in March and his daughter's grin, and when he woke up, the sun was coming through the window, and Rosie was standing in the doorway asking if they could have pancakes. He made them. A little lumpy, a little burned, the way he always did. Rosie drowned hers in maple syrup and ate them with her fingers. Outside, Halcyon Creek was waking up. The bakery lights were on. Someone was walking a dog down Birch Street. The garage was waiting for him, full of cars that needed fixing and a day that needed filling. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was his, and it was enough. And the butter tarts were free for life. And somewhere his wife was smiling about that.